Street Smart podcast. This time we're taking it international. I'm talking to Sidney Minassian, one of the guys that I really enjoy talking to most of the time when we would be out in Vegas at tech conference back when I stepped out of oil and gas and into tech for just a bit. But Sidney was kind enough to work out his schedule to be a part of this. He's in Australia, Sydney, Australia, right?
Sydney from Sydney. That's a real thing.
That's right. It's named after you, correct?
It is indeed.
Yeah. And Sydney, like I said, Sydney, I met him. I was thinking about this the other day, or actually in the lead up to this. You and I met each other. It's been 6 years now, man. Isn't that crazy? 2016.
I'm gone.
At reInvent in Las Vegas. And, every year we'd go back to reInvent and you and I'd sit in the cafeteria there and we'd have long conversations about everything. And just always one of my things I would look forward to when we were going to reInvent was getting to sit down with you. So Sidney, thank you so much for taking time to do this. I know it's the middle of the day there for you. It's evening time for me. So I'm going to sip on a drink and you can sip on tea and whatever you need to do. But thank you so much for being a part of this.
Well, firstly, congratulations for launching this podcast, Justin. And yeah, absolutely. It's always good speaking with you and it's a pleasure to be here.
Awesome. So this thing, you and I talked a little bit off air about kind of the concept behind this, and it aligns really nicely with a lot of your projects. And before we get into those projects, I want to kind of get started talking about who you are. And I always like to start at birth. That's a pretty good place to start. So where were you born and where did you grow up?
Great. So Sydney from Sydney is a real thing. Parents had a great sense of humor. No, I'm kidding. I was actually born overseas. So ethnically, I'm Armenian, and I was born in Iran in 75. I think we were just offline talking about our ages here. And you may have heard there was a revolution. And so we left.
Yeah, it was. I think there was some news about that.
That's going on right now. Yeah. So we left in 1980, and we had some family in Australia. So we moved to Australia in 1980. And serendipitously, Dad had a good mate in the army back when. His name was Sidney, and he used to say it's a unique name, no one's got it, and so Dad liked it, so he thought he was being cool naming me Sydney in the Middle East, and but we ended up in Australia, so maybe
that's hilarious.
That was meant to be. So of course, landing in Australia. I was a prime target for a little bit of bullying when you're 4.5, 5 years old and you can't speak the language, and your name is Sydney. But certainly I've turned it.
I would imagine there's not a tremendous amount of Armenians born in Iran that are named Sydney.
No,
you might be a one of one, man.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, so that's that was where I was born. But then growing up, I have done all my growing up in Australia, so I went to local schools, high school, public school, high school. You guys call it middle school, and then high school, and so on.
Right.
And then university.
Well, what do y'all call it?
We don't call middle school. We don't have a middle school concept. So you just go from elementary into high school. So year 7 to 12 is high school here in Australia.
Okay, so we call it junior high.
10, you guys have junior.
Yeah, that's right. Okay.
Anyway, so grew up in Australia, did my schooling here, and then got into the workforce and university simultaneously. And maybe we'll talk about that because that's an interesting sort of decision point and a trajectory from the entrepreneurial journey perspective. And I'm blessed to be married to a wonderful woman, 3 kids, 17, 15, and 12. And in between those periods, like from 1980 to now, I lived in the Bay Area in the US for about 5 years. So 2008, we moved there. And then 2012, we moved back. So I moved, Obama got elected, second generation iPhone got launched, Steve Jobs passed away, and then global financial crisis hit and all that terrible stuff. So I was living in Palo Alto in the Bay Area. In fact, my youngest is a little American. So we talk about I had one successful startup in the US and we brought him back home, and so otherwise it's been pretty much an Australian affair, an Australian story, and I think we're very blessed to be in this country.
Yeah, Australia is one of those places I've not ever been, but it's one of those places everyone wants to go. It's kind of like Italy; everybody wants to go there, and to get to Australia is not a it's not a short trip, but it's definitely something that's on the list. I want to get there, and it's I mean it just looks amazing. It's one of those places though where in the states we look at it and we think literally everything in Australia is designed to kill you in some way. So it's quite the place.
Yeah,
And then,
we do that.
obviously
We do that on purpose from a marketing perspective. It keeps us.
marketing.
We've got more space. It's not overcrowded. So the people
That's
that are
right.
worried about a 20-hour flight or a 13-hour flight, depending on if you're coming from East Coast or West Coast, or if you're worried about everything's going to kill you, then yeah, we keep you guys away. But literally, there's nothing,
Yeah.
none of
So
that
the
going on.
people that do end
Not
up
for nothing. Get
braving the
over here,
trip
dude.
there. Yeah, that's right. The people that do brave the trip over there are the ones that are like, that's not going to kill me. So,
That's right.
and being, sixth generation Texan, I'm for sure coming. It's not a big
That's
deal. But it's hilarious. And obviously, my knowledge of Australia almost begins and ends with Crocodile Dundee. So it's not the greatest it's not the it's not the greatest knowledge bank on Australia, but very interesting. Your childhood going from Iran to Australia as an adult, moving to the U.S. and I'd love to kind of explore all of that stuff. Well, when you were growing up, your parents did your dad? What did he do? Did he own businesses or did he work? Where did he work?
So typical immigrant story, arrived almost with nothing. Given we had to sort of, we weren't quite refugees as such. Like we got in with proper visas and things like that. Given we had family
Hmm.
here, but it wasn't like like the way I moved to the US. That was like I'd
Right,
raised money and everything was comfortable and so on.
right,
So yeah, Gotti, and for kids not to know a new language is one thing. For a middle-aged person or young adult not to know the language and have to sort of look after a family is something else. So for
sure,
dad, it was quite tough. Mum actually was blessed with having had education in English. She'd left Iran, gone to India, got an educated, and so she'd finished a school. There's a Armenian and English school there that she'd been part of. So she was working for Barclays Bank in Iran. She
okay.
got a straight
Hmm.
transfer to Barclays in Sydney, so that was nice.
Oh, great. So she was able to. You
Yeah,
were able to hit the ground
yeah,
there
hit
with
the
her
ground
having
running,
employment.
fantastic. But with dad,
Yeah.
unfortunately, he had to give up, what was a professional services role in accounting to literally start cleaning, and eventually peeling potatoes to then making his way up to becoming a chef. So today, Touchwood is 70 something, still buzzes around with high energy, and he's a chef at a hospital, still works. But in between those sort of having multiple jobs, he actually had a sort of a lucky business opportunity that did land for him. And he
Oh,
ended up
nice.
running a cleaning business. And I was about 13, 14 at the time. And I always used to do his accounts for him. So every fortnight had to prepare his invoices, because, he didn't really know how to operate a computer back then and
Sure.
so on. And so, yeah, I'd prepare his invoices. But of course, very early on, I'd start giving business advice, right? And I kept saying, Dad, like,
Yeah. Well, at 14, you knew what was up
yeah. I
already.
was like, so I think I could sort of, I was interested, obviously, in business topics, but I could also see this at practice. And I was like, you're working too hard. And for what you're doing, like, you've got a single point of success, which means a single point of failure. You've got,
Mm,
concentration with the one or two big hospitals or whatever, but you're doing all the work. You should be hiring people, delegating things, whatever. And he kept saying, oh, no one's going to do the job as well as me, and blah, 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 blah. And of course, once
sure.
those contracts get lost, he hadn't done the business development side of things. So effectively, that was the end of his business. So it
Oh,
served
wow.
well, it paid well, but it was more self employed rather than a company. So now, with a lot of the coaching that I do, I keep constantly recognizing founders and I sort of reminding them: are you just creating a job for yourself, or are you trying to build an engine that does what it
Sure.
needs to do to serve you, not you're a slave to that business. So anyway,
Right.
dad. But the work ethic I absolutely get from both my parents. Not only did they land in a country and had to do the immigrant thing, build from nothing, They both worked very hard. Mum also went back to the workforce after having my brothers, so she's just celebrated 30 years with the health department in New
Oh,
South
wow.
Wales, where she's an administrator around the methadone program, which is for drug addicts that are coming off it,
Sure,
whatever.
sure.
So yeah, but, and they're both in their 70s and are still working. And so I think it's more for purpose and like I think they're okay. They've done well. They've
Mhm.
got multiple grandkids and given they probably would have retired a couple of years ago, but with the pandemic, they're like, what are we going to do? So they've
Right,
got
that's
they've
right.
got they still keep working. So anyway, point being,
You know, my
we
dad
we learn we learn
my dad's about the
we
same.
learn we learn that
Go ahead,
work
I'm sorry.
ethic. Sorry, we learn that work ethic from them, and whether you like it or not, there's things you want to take from your parents and the things you don't want to take from your parents. But I
Right.
appreciate the work ethic bit that I've gotten from both of them, like disciplined, committed, and yeah, good workers.
Yeah, same here. My dad, owned businesses my whole life, and I've watched him, sacrifice for, those businesses, and he was self-employed, but he also ran company. He ran a company,
Right.
he had employees and the whole thing, and I just remember as a young man watching that, and really it was just a real abject lesson in what it takes to do that. And I find it interesting that when you were young, 14 years old, watching your dad and even recognizing then, some of the trappings that he may have been falling into, are you creating a job for yourself or are you trying to build something that can last? And do you think that from that very young age, do you think that began to form you into the person you are today, obviously? And then is that something that helped you when helped you go helped you make the decision that, man, I want to run a business one day, I want to own my own business, or is that what started that trajectory, or was it something else?
No, so I think so. Certainly, did it affect and has it shaped me? Absolutely, yes. So even when things in life um, are contrasts to what you believe in or believe is good, that actually shapes you as well, right? Because you say, "Oh, that's something I don't want," versus, "Oh, that's something
Hmm.
I do want," right? So at the time where I could see he was working very hard, but I just thought, like, cu- there's one thing about pain and hard work. But there's another thing about suffering and also finding that balance and enjoyment, right? Where
Sure.
you, and you look at something more holistically and you go, well, are you well? Like, what does well mean, and what does success mean? And well, maybe we'll come back to that. But I used to look at that and go, something's not right here. Yes, you're working very, very, very hard, but
Right.
why? Like, where's the why? So
What was it that you saw there that gave you that idea that, hey man, this balance isn't right, there's something off here? How did you recognize that at 14?
well, I'm probably more articulate about it now because I've done a lot of deeper thinking about it and reflecting on
Sure.
both on myself, on how I'm a parent to my kids, how I'm a leader for the companies that I run, or the coach to the CEOs that I coach. But really, it's for me the trigger was always noticing his short temperedness and
Mm,
and also other things like, for example, there was such focus on um, you know. The priority is like, oh, we're going to pay off the house or whatever. But and I have a great relationship with my dad. We're able to have this conversation very openly and
sure.
accept this now. But it's like we never did a family holiday. I don't have a memory of camping with my dad
Mm,
or going on a trip. Whereas I've really made an effort with my kids that you know I'm there. Now you'd argue the parents thought they were doing it for the kids, but often it's the kids just need you just to be there rather than
it's
you
it's
for
such
them or
a
pay off
it's
a
such
house
an
that
easy trap to
yeah,
fall.
I've left that house. That house is his, it's not mine, right?
Right.
And so he thought he's building a
Right.
new house for us. But, you know, um, learning from that, I was like, okay, I want a better balance in my life. And so
Sure.
I learned from
It's such an easy trap. It's such an easy trap to fall into, and I've watched other CEOs that I've worked for fall into that. And you convince yourself, I'm doing this for the family. I'm doing this for my kids, for my wife, whatever. And in the background, what you're really doing is grinding your family into a powder. And not saying your dad did that, but I'm saying I've watched others
yeah.
do that, and it ends up costing them everything. And they might have a successful business, but at the end of the day, what did they really achieve? And you're exactly right to see that. And and so the fact that you didn't have those family holidays, is that what propelled you then to say, I'm not going to, I want to do these things. I want to own businesses and run businesses, but I'm not going to do it that way.
That came later on. That came later on with
Sure.
having my own kids and then maturity. So I didn't figure that out at 14, 15, 20, 25, right?
Right.
So
Right.
that didn't happen. But
Right.
what very early on, I knew I was going to be in business. I love the concept of being a businessman. Half of it was probably driven, maybe I'll change the ratio. Maybe a third of it was driven by my personality. That from very early on, I saw myself as a leader. I saw myself as a good member of community. Like, I was involved in all the school activities, debating, school vice captain, school prefect, the the various committees around, just to be part of community. So I always had that role. So I saw that as an extension into, yeah, I'm going to be a business leader, be a business person. The second aspect, or the second third of that, would have come from just listening to other people's rubbish around money and success and what it is. And so for me, yeah, I knew I wanted to get into business and yeah, very early on. And so straight out of high school, well, actually, in my final year of school, year 12, I had written 50 letters to every single financial services company operating in Australia, pitching them on giving me some type of, like we call it here, traineeship or cadetship. In the US, what do you call it when you're doing
It's probably like an
internship
intern.
type thing? Yeah, so you're sort of getting
Yeah.
paid,
Internship.
but you're also doing your university simultaneously.
Sure. Sure. It'd be like a paid
Paid
internship.
internships, yeah. So I pitched them
Yep.
on that, and this was back in '93, right? So Australia was going through another recession at the time. No one was hiring graduates, let alone undergraduates. But literally,
Sure.
I wrote 50 letters, and um, and so these were early signs that I was an entrepreneur, but I didn't realize I was an entrepreneur, right? So the pitching, the trying things that just do not exist,
Sure.
and because I knew there.
Yeah, and back then in '93, it wasn't like I'm shooting out
Correct.
50
Like,
emails. You were
no, yeah. So
handwriting
I got
letters,
this typed up. I
putting
got this
postage
typed up.
on
Put it
them,
in
and
exactly.
mailing
Put
it.
it in the mail. Send it in.
That's
Find
right.
out who it is.
That's
It's
right.
hard. Like, there was no internet. You can't find out who these people are. You
That's
got to
exactly right.
do a bit of research. And so I sent these letters out, and um, because I knew there was a recession going on, I didn't send it to the HR department because I knew I would get an automatic rejection
Yeah.
letter.
A
Hey,
a
we don't
form letter
hire. Thank you.
back.
So I thought, well, let me go higher. So let me just send it to the CEO or the managing director of these businesses. So now I laugh about it. I'm like, wait a
Why
minute. I
not?
sent a letter, sorry, to the CEO of, let's say, the equivalent of Wells Fargo, right here in Australia, Commonwealth
Right.
Bank. Yeah, of course I did. And I laugh about that now as the
It makes sense
17-year-old
to
I was
me.
back then, or 18-year-old. And I
Yeah.
got I think a ton of no responses, of course. But then I got about 25 rejection letters out of the 50, and I kept them all. Up until about a few years ago, where I just took screenshots, like photos of them, and then I threw them out. But I kept all the letters.
You
Yeah,
digitize
ABN
them.
AMRO, like all the international banks that were operating here, and all of them were basically said, "Look, thank you, but no thank you, because we're not hiring right now." But at least that they wrote back to me. One of
That's right.
them, Chase, actually US bank, said, "We don't have a job, but who the hell are you? I mean, who does this? Come in, and at least I
Right.
will offer you an
Right.
experience of an interview if you're up for it, because you seem like an interesting guy." So I said, "Yep, of course I'll take that."
Oh,
So
that's
I came
great.
into the World Trade Center here in Sydney, and I went and met with the VP of Human Resources for Chase Manhattan Bank, and it was a mock interview, and we knew there was no job, but he was like, "Who the hell does this?" And the reason why it also said,
Well, I can't name another 17-year-old that got to sit down with that
that's
person
right.
and have an
Yeah.
interview. Probably
Not
not
many. So it was
many.
good experience, which I banked. And the reason also when he said, "Who the hell does this?" was my letter was so unconventional. So one of
Sure.
my cousins, she's an English teacher. And so I got her to review my letter. And she's like, "No, no, 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 you can't send this. Like, you're meant to write, "Dear Sir, Madam, I'm applying for, for this, next year I'm going to finish uni. I'm applying for this kind of, sorry, next year I'm going to get into uni, and I'm applying for a position that's not advertised," and very formal, very cordial, very bland, very vanilla, right? And so after she
Sure,
left, I went,
sure.
"Yep, I'm not using her letter. I'm using my letter, which I'd written."
Right.
And my letter started with
Yeah, because everyone else is going to
exactly.
send a letter like
So
she's
imagine if
wanting
you
me to
received
write.
a letter from me that said, "Dear Justin, determination, responsibility, optimism, and success are a few key words which describe the attitude with which I wish to enter the workforce." I still remember what exactly I wrote, right? And so that was the
Yeah,
pop.
I would be
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
"Who
Who is this
is this
crazy?
kid?
What kind of drugs is he on?
What is going on
So,
here?"
so that sort of triggered it, and then from anyway, I used all those that experience of writing the letters, that interview process, whatever. I ended up also applying for a actually a proper internship program with National Australia Bank, which is one of the largest banks here. It's one
Hmm.
of the four majors. Again, Wells Fargo type equivalent size wise. And I got into their program, except I wanted to get into investment banking, not retail banking. And this was going to be a retail banking leadership acceleration thing. So they'd pay for my university, and they'd give me job experience and take me across. And I was like, well, it's better than nothing. It's not investment banking. I
Sure.
wanted investment banking. Why did I want investment banking? Well, it's really the smart stuff. You get to wear braces, buy low, sell high, really
Yeah,
intelligent stuff, right? Anyway,
that's right.
I'd accepted the role, and then I saw another ad in the paper for a Japanese bank advertising for a graduate role, and I was like, "Doesn't matter, I'm going to apply." So the job hadn't started yet. I applied.
Yeah.
Long story short, got 200 applicants. I got interviewed down to me and this one other girl for the role, and the senior manager was like, "Sid, like everyone else is graduate. You still have to start uni." Um,
Right.
and
That's
anyway,
right.
eventually they said, "We're sorry, we've given the job to the other girl. We think that that foreign exchange role for you would be limiting. The way you are, you're so energetic. We think you're going to get bored in no time and leave. There could be another
Hmm.
role opening up in derivatives, which is a little bit more complex. It's going to push your learning ability. That's going to open up in about 6 months. So how about we just stay in touch, go for a beer, and if the job comes up, you know, we'll discuss it then." And again, like this is you look back, you go, I didn't realize then, but now, like experience in negotiation, whatever. I didn't bat an eyelid. Like I sat there at the age of 18, looked at this guy square in the eyes and said, "That's awesome. Happy to go for a beer, but I've told you I've got this offer with National Australia Bank. If I take that role, I'm not going to
Right.
leave in 6 months. It's not good for my career, them, or for me. So let's just say this is never
Right.
going to happen, and let's leave it at that." So next day I get a call that says, "Sid, that job that was going to be open for you in 6 months, it's ready. Do not take the National Australia job." So I ended up getting back. I got the investment
Oh
banking
wow.
role in back office derivative settlements and so on. So that was and I look back, I go, all of those behaviors are signs of a entrepreneurial dude that is a hustler, not
Sure.
someone who was going to take a job. And case in point, I was always unsettled in working for others because I just felt like there's more I could
Sure.
do. So I had a great
Let me.
go
I have
for
a
it.
question though. I have a question about that specific experience though. So you're sitting there as an 18-year-old, and you're not in the room with a bunch of lightweight people. You're in the room with people that have been in business. Again, working for others, but they're business people. Did you at 18 recognize, hey man, I'm kind of talking out of my ass just a little bit, or were you so confident in your ability to pull it off that you were just like, hey, I listen, I'm going to take this other role, and I really appreciate you saying that maybe I'd be more, fit for derivatives or whatever. That role's not available. This one is. I'm taking it, and thanks for your time, but no thanks. Did you in that moment when you were having that conversation, did you think, man, I'm going to push them to make this decision faster, or were you aware enough of the negotiation process to think that, or were you just simply saying, you know what, I appreciate it, but this other thing is
Yeah,
available, and I'm
no,
going to jump there?
I wasn't that aware of pushing the sale or the negotiation process. It just comes back to one of
Sure.
my values of just being transparent. and that's what I was thinking.
Mhm.
And you know, but I you know, one, I didn't understand, let's say, you know, pushing the sale or speeding it up or any of that, but I understood the value of your word, right? And so to me, that was the honourable thing to do at that time, to just be very, because I'd been transparent all through the interview. Hey, I've got this other role, but I've applied here. You know, I don't have a degree, but I've still applied because I believe I can do it. This is what I want. So that was just
Mhm.
being me and being just double downing on me. So just that honesty factor was what led me
Sure.
to it. But then I look back, I'm like, that would have pushed them, right? And now, of course, you know, scarcity.
Absolutely.
Of course, you know, scarcity pushes a sale, pushes the value in a deal. All that's good. But back then,
Yeah, you gotta
to
create
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 urgency. But back then, I
urgency,
was just
right?
being an honest 18-year-old kid, just saying, "Hey, I appreciate it, but I'm also telling you, you know, that I won't do this in 6 months. So don't hold out for me because it won't be the right thing from a."
Sure, and I think what's, I think another thing to take from that is just the transparency like you talked about that, hey, I'm a man of my word. So if I take this other role that I'm telling you I'm going to take, it's wrong of me to
Correct.
do that to them to
Correct.
bounce in 6 months because you made
Correct.
this other role for me. So I'm letting you know up front, I'm taking this role, I'm giving them my word, and it's wrong of me to go back on that word. So I think the fact that not only are you transparent, but they saw in you someone that is, forthright and honest and truly and true to their word. And so I think that's there's a lot of things going on there, obviously creating that sense of urgency being one of the largest things, but there are a lot of
Yes.
things going on there that if they're sitting across the table from you, they're going, man, there's something about this kid that we need to figure out
Yeah.
something, get him on board. So that's awesome. So they call you and say, hey, that thing in 6 months,
Do you
it's
want
ready
it?
now,
Yeah.
do you want it?
So they were thinking of actually moving someone
Yeah.
on because it was a low performer. So then they went, well, this is the trigger. We're moving them on. And I ended up creating such a
Right.
good relationship with the guy who hired me, who he ended up actually investing in future businesses when I left and whatever. So,
Oh,
and we're
wow.
still in touch, and I help him and he helps me, and all that good stuff. But yeah, it's really interesting how, and
That's
that's
great.
maybe one thing as well that I value a lot is relationships, people. Like it's all about people. So yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. So you spend that time. So you
took the
took that
job.
job,
Yeah.
right? Yep. And so how long did you spend working in
So
derivatives?
the whole idea was I would go in through the back office doing settlements work. You know, when you call up the other bank and say our traders did a deal with your traders, and how much was it, and what's the due
Hmm.
date, and all that stuff. And then you got to, it's admin, right? It's administration. But the whole idea is,
Yeah. So like
yeah, you
yeoman
got to
type
you got to
work,
sort
right?
of do your time and then make it into the dealing room. And so the whole idea was I'll go this, do my time, and then make my way into the front office. That's sort of the holy grail of getting those roles, and
Gotcha.
that's where you get paid the big bucks, and that's where all the fanfare was meant to be. But of course, I didn't know anything about that business, right? Coming in as an outsider, you just think that's what you want. What I discovered, well, a few things happened. Firstly, um, I very quickly got bored, even in the derivatives role. I just quickly understood it. It was
Hmm.
administration processes. Um, Ended up taking on, 10 other things within the company that were not my job, but they just kept giving it to me to keep me busy. So, you know, at the time, you won't believe there was two computers in the back office for a team of 40 people, and so eventually everyone started getting computers, but people were not aware of how to use Excel or Word in the proper way. So I became the go-to guy, and then I created a little training manual to hand out to these older people than me, of course, on how we use Excel and what we're using it for. So ended up taking on all these extra
Right.
projects, which meant my university studies suffered. And so at the end of that year, I got thrown out
Mm.
of uni because I'd failed too many credit. I didn't get enough credit points that I'd passed. Right, I'd failed, and so of course, disaster for the immigrant family. We came here for your education. What are you doing to us? We told you don't take a job. We'll pay for your uni. What are you doing? And I kept saying
Right.
this.
That's
It
right.
does this. Uni's not it. But I just didn't have the command of experience, understanding, insight, language, and evidence to explain it to them back then.
Yeah. You
Yeah,
didn't know how
yeah.
to
I just
articulate the fact that,
in the
hey, this
DNA,
is
I just
not for
felt
me.
like we put so much emphasis around university. That's not it, right? Anyway, long story short, I ended up.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
agree. I agree completely. I actually didn't finish
Yeah.
college. University. I would say I would assume
Yes,
uni
yes.
is short for university. I didn't finish it. I was not kicked out. I was selected out by my parents because I was just
Right.
wasting their time and money. And but it was the same and similar to your description of getting bored in derivatives. I would tend to understand things fairly quickly, and then I would get really frustrated with the
Right.
fact that others didn't, and so
Right.
then I just would stop going. And you can't graduate
That's right.
college doing that. So, uh, but it obviously didn't change. It didn't change for me what I wanted in life. It just changed maybe how I
Exactly.
had to get there.
And
Right.
that's the point. We try to put people in boxes, and that's not humans. As humans, we're here for expansive growth, not to be contained. And everything that we do after from the minute where we're born, we're trying to just unshackle ourselves from society, from the things that
Yep.
have been put on us. Anyway, so to keep them happy, I ended up re-enrolling. I actually have a master's degree, but not an undergraduate degree. So even then, I figured out a hack on how to get them.
How
By
did
the
you do
time I went to
that?
enroll for the master's degree, I'd had enough specific, deep financial services experience and a few credit points from my
Mm,
undergraduates program that they allowed it almost like a mature age entry program where they allow you to enter the uni and,
hmm.
and do it. So I got in.
I wonder if you can do that in the U.S. I might try that. I might just try to skip undergrad and
You,
go
you
straight
might be
to
able to enroll at your yes,
masters.
at our age. You might be able to enroll for an MBA without an undergraduate.
Yeah, you're gonna say at your
Yeah, yeah,
age,
yeah.
you were about to call me
I'm,
old, and I was going to
yeah,
remind you, you're actually older than me
exactly
by a couple months.
at
So
your
you
young
better
age.
watch it. Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
exactly,
I'm just a
exactly.
kid,
We're
man.
all
I'm
just
just a
kids.
kid.
So anyway, few things happened. So yeah,
Right.
got thrown out of uni, but then re-enrolled. And what I found was the master's program. I was with more mature people. It was done in the city in the evening. I didn't have to travel too far to get to the university. So I worked in the city, and I got to do my uni in the city. That worked out well. And I've got the photo to prove, and I gave it to the parents. There you go. That's for you. Um, there
Yeah,
you
there I
go.
did it, right? Yeah, I got it done. So, and I agree. And a lot of times I've found that later in life, once I ended up going to, conferences or, training things that directly applied to what I was doing, I was so much more engaged in that. And I was so much more apt to pay attention and want to excel in that because I saw an absolute instant need
Yes.
and application for it. So,
And I don't
maybe that's what you're
know
seeing too
what
in
I
that master's
was
program.
reacting to at the time. It could have been a combination of I was just hungry to hit the road from an entrepreneurial perspective, and I just couldn't articulate it in that way. And I just wanted to
Right.
get work, earn money, create things, have impact. That's what was driving me, right? Or it could have been the fact that uni was forced on me versus, hey, it's an option. So with my three kids, I say it's
Yeah.
an option. And in fact, we went and did a university tour for my elder daughter the other day. She wants to do law. She wants it. She absolutely wants it. And I was there watching the class, like, how it might play. And I'm excited for her. And I was thinking, wow, this could have been
Yeah.
cool if I'd had my time again. Maybe I could have done full time uni and part time entrepreneurship, which wasn't really optional back then, like in our days, right? In the way it is now with the internet and having side hustles and
Right.
whatever. But the point was, maybe I was like, well, you know, I'm not really interested in doing another 3 years, 4 years of study. I really want to get working and have impact and make money. And you don't need necessarily uni for that. And the uni degree does not validate me as a human, me as a person of impact. Whereas for my parents, that's what was hammered into them. And I think them and others, they suffer a lot, right, from society's expectations of
Sure.
what will others say about your kids or you or how you live your life. And that's a lot of I keep saying every next generation has to screw up their kids less. And a lot of the coaching that I do now with CEOs, a lot of it is to do with their own mental understanding of who they are and who they're becoming. And a lot of it has to do unshackling of childhood
Mm.
shackles or traumas, 70% created by parents unknowingly, right?
Hmm.
It's all in your home. It's all in your home. They think
Yeah,
they're doing
and
the best,
probably
but
created by
it's all
parents
in
who
your home.
think that's right. That's exactly what I was about to say. Parents that are not doing it like
Never,
in a
never,
malicious way. They're doing it
never.
thinking, "Hey, man, I'm trying to give you the leg up." And you'll remember, when we were kids, the way to get ahead, at least in the US, and I can't imagine it would be much different in Australia, was, hey, you want to get ahead in life? You
That's it.
go to college, you get a degree, you go out in the workforce, you make a good employee, and you move up through the ranks. And next thing you know, you're a vice president,
Exactly.
and you're killing it. And at the end of the day, when I look at it, uh, that was not my path, and I'm doing okay in life. And I'm sure you're same experience. Even though you have a master's degree, you got some sort of workaround, which you and I are going to figure that out offline, because nothing would be more me than to be like, yeah, I know I didn't graduate college, but here's my
Right.
master's degree. Yeah,
Yeah,
people would be like, oh, that
that's
makes
it.
sense. That absolutely makes sense. And so awesome. And so
So anyway, I was telling you this
so
job
now you've
story, right?
gotten
So yeah, anyway, so
right.
took on lots of other things, and which at the bank, it was called IBJ, by the way, Industrial Bank of Japan, which got taken over by
Okay.
and merged, and it's now known as the Mizuho Group. It's one of the largest Japanese banks out there today. So I loved it, loved my time there. What happened was I ended up taking on all these extra projects, which absolutely expanded my mind, and also made me realize that
Mm,
I'm not built for sitting in front of a screen, buying low, selling high. That's not me. I actually have a passion for people. And also, I love how I got involved in all the elements of how the bank came together. And so I got involved in writing, requirements gathering for new products that had to be built, like software. I got involved in new policies and procedures documentation on how we do things. So I found that way more interesting, and to be able to have a bird's eye view of how this entire bank runs rather than sitting in front of a screen buying low, selling high. And at the time, you may or may not recall, there was a UK bank called Barings Bank, and Nick Leeson, a rogue trader in Singapore,
nope.
was doing all these secret trades, thinking he's going to make a lot of money, but the market kept moving against him, and it ended up basically making the entire bank go under. It's the oldest bank in the UK, so there's been movies written on it. Nick Leeson,
Oh
you'd
wow.
know about it. That actually triggered a whole bunch of regulatory changes globally. So out of Basel, the capital adequacy, segregation of duties, creating a middle office in a banking scenario. So no longer just a front and back office, but you need to create a risk management function. And so I was there when all of this was happening. And so our bank ended up creating this separate division, separate function. We're a small outpost of a large Japanese bank. But what happened was, because we had to do everything, and I was the junior shit kicker that kept saying, "Give me more projects, give me more things, give me." I learnt so much,
Right.
like everything. I was everyone's gopher. I was everyone's doer. Of course, uni suffered, but that didn't matter. I was learning, so
Yeah,
I was
you
everyone's
were
go-to.
also
Yeah,
everyone's
and everything was
go-to.
a yes with me.
Uh, being the gopher is one thing, but being the go-to, that sort of goes along with that. And that's been my career in a nutshell. Is just
Yeah,
what's not
give
getting
it to me.
done. Oh, I'll do it. I remember being interviewed by someone one time, and they asked me, "What else can you do other than what you're interviewing for?" And my answer to that person, and it probably was my own just blind arrogance, obviously, was, "I can do anything that you ask me to do as
Perfect.
long as you give me a chance
But
to learn it."
that's
And
attitude. That's
I was
attitude,
told
right?
later, yeah, well, I was told later by that guy that it was down between me and another guy, and that answer is what got me the job. And I thought then, man, and I meant it when I said it.
Correct.
It wasn't like it was just some empty thing. It was something that absolutely has, driven me throughout my career. And listening to your story so far, it sounds like that's kind of your thing too. Like, hey man, show me what's not getting done that needs to get done that nobody wants to do,
Yeah,
and I'll figure that
and
out better than anyone can.
this silly optimism that nothing's new in the world. Someone else has already solved this, so it's just a matter of connecting the dots. And so,
Right.
over, like, I've been in
That's right.
technology entrepreneurship for a long time, but I'm not a technologist. I actually describe myself as the glue between people, technology, and change. And that goes back to the IBJ story, where I was that glue. I could see things that needed to happen, and I had the ability to
Right.
be that connector. And again, the most lowest
I
paid,
sort of close those
lowest
gaps,
level
right? You've
seniority wise role, but that just made me learn so much, right? And so I was just fortunate, so blessed that I got to do that. um,
Did you find yourself when you were like you just described, right? You're in the, kind of the lowest paid, lowest rung on the ladder kind of guy, but you're doing all of these things. Did you find yourself as the lowest person on the ladder sitting in meetings you had no business being in, as a result of your
Totally.
willingness to
And
take on
not
projects?
only would I do that, I would get involved in
Yeah.
industry level things where there'd be industry associations and
Right.
things like that, and everyone would send senior people from their companies, and I'd say, if no one's going from our side, I'll go. I'll go represent. So this is junior. But, yeah,
Yeah. Hey,
and
man,
so
I'll
yeah,
talk to
and
him.
but that was also my ego, like thinking I'm important. I go to these things, right? So over time, you figure out, there's my ego playing.
Right.
This is my general curiosity playing. I did this for this reason. I'm doing this for this reason, and then you go, well, where do I want to be? And you want to work less on ego driven things and more core to you and your growth and whatever. But it's a natural part of it. But yeah, I did end up having those situations. I loved the fact that I got that role at the age of 18. I got to do new things that no one at my age had done. So yeah, that sort of fed my ego, um,
Sure.
and sort of had that role for I think I'm going to say 4 years, 3.5 years maybe, and then one of my managers moved to KPMG to set up a specialty treasury and risk
Mm,
consulting group to help all the other financial services institutions in Australia get through these regulatory changes that included
mhm.
technology implementations, people and process changes, and whatever. And then so he offered me a job at KPMG. So I ended up going across to KPMG with a bit of a bump in pay and a title of assistant manager. I still hadn't graduated, remember, right? So I was still doing part time.
Right. You're at this point, you're like
I'm
what,
22.
21,
Yeah.
22 years old, right?
And so I've got 4 years of experience
Yeah. Yeah.
basically from the IBJ background, and then I've now moved to KPMG in this assistant manager role. And again, youngest person in that role. So the professional
Sure.
services firms, it's all about time billing. They put you out on a client site. Here's the 2 week project, Sydney. Every project they put
That's
me
right.
out to, 2 week project, 3 week project, it turned into a 3 month project. I talk to everyone, become friends with everyone, identify new opportunities, uh, and end up not only extending my value that I could bring, but also identify other team members or partners that I'd go, there's a funds management requirement here, not just treasury. Let's bring in out of my own will, I'd go and just do something that would be done at a more senior level. And so I held that role for a couple of years, and I kept noticing that I'm bringing in a lot of value for these guys. And I'd say to them, guys, like, is there a way I can have some share of the revenue that I bring in, or some bonus structure, or a pay rise, or something? And I was basically after
Did you legitimately ask KPMG for
not equity,
KPMG
equity,
for
but
equity? Like,
yeah, yeah,
is
yeah,
there
yeah.
some sort
And
of
they were
profit
like,
sharing we can do
Sid,
here,
like,
guys? Like, yeah.
yeah, yeah. They're like, Sid,
You
listen,
realize who I am
you're the
here? I
youngest,
mean, come on.
most unqualified,
Yeah.
overpaid manager we've ever hired. Shut the hell up, do your
That's
job,
right.
literally. And they'd
That's
say it
right.
in a loving way because
Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
never arrogant about it. It was always like, "Hey guys, come on, look." Anyway, and so I think I was after $5,000 to $10,000 pay rise, which they went, "No, I think you're at the top of." They've got bands and and I respect that. Now that I run businesses, I'm
Sure,
like,
sure.
you got to have structure. You can't just willy nilly offer things to anyone. Any kid
That's
who
right.
comes along and says, "I want something." But what I felt was I could do this on my own, and I could earn better money. So I think at the time, yeah, I was 22. I may have been earning $70,000, which was decent, having not graduated back when, right?
Hey, man, I
Yeah,
wasn't making 70
and
grand at
yeah,
22
yeah.
years
But
old.
still,
So,
I
hey,
was
man,
like, no,
you were
no, like
killing it
so
as
they
far as
didn't
I'm
give me
concerned.
75, and I'm like, I'm leaving. So I left, and that was the start of my. So at the age of 24, I left. Um, and that was the start of my entrepreneurial career. And I'm now 47, and I've never had a job since. So since then I've been doing my
So,
own things. But case in point, that first year of me doing my own consulting business, like starting to do consulting services for banks and in risk management and projects and whatever, I think it wasn't exactly 300K. It would have been like 285K that I brought home that year, that
man,
first
that's
year.
incredible. And
Yeah.
really,
So I was like, yeah.
it
And of course, my parents were shocked again. Mum was like, after all these years, you finish uni, you just finished
right.
uni. By that time, I just got
That's
to
right.
uni. You've got a job at KPMG. Keep your job at KPMG. What are
That's
you
right.
doing? People are killing themselves to get a KPMG job, Sydney. Just hang in there. You'll become senior manager in no time. Nah, I'm leaving.
Yeah, you'll
So
become
anyway,
senior manager in about 20 years,
yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
just destroy your soul trying to get there. And that's not to disparage KPMG. That's just the way it goes. But so,
I'm massively thankful for my KPMG experience, by
oh
the
yeah,
way.
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
I learned so much. I got to, see another side of the business, and it gave me. And not everything is for everyone always, and so that was fine. I think it was a good value exchange at the time. In fact, I've got a great relationship with them even to the day. I'm in fact catching up with the senior leadership team next week here, to explore ideas and opportunities and whatever. So yeah. Not everything is for everyone. It's just about being self-realized and going,
sure.
my time's done. I'm now ready for my next chapter.
So at 24, you start your own consulting company. It sounds like,
Yeah,
and so you were going into banks and basically uh, doing what you'd been doing as a W-2 employee now as a paid consultant. And so, how long did that? What was the name of that company?
yeah. It was called Montage Advisory because
Montage Advisory.
I'd be across everything. It was like a montage. I'd montage everything, right? Um,
That's a very elaborate name.
Elaborate name, yeah. And so and I look back, I was like, yep. Well, actually, what led me to getting out of that was I did that for a few years and then realized, yep, good money, but I'm just self-employed. I didn't have people were buying, I was just it would have been equivalent of just taking contractor roles, right?
They were
So
buying
I
Sydney. They
would
weren't buying
I was buying Sydney. There was no expertise, there was
Montage.
no differentiation, there was no IP as such. But of course, typical Sid fashion, I'd created brochures with my photo. I went and got professional photos done and really tried to
That's right. You
start
churched it
building a
up. We say in the
yeah.
States you churched it up quite a bit.
That's it.
That's right.
So always had multiple attempts at, like, now I think I'm pretty good at positioning and marketing and go to market. Like, there's been lots of practice at this, right from writing that first letter to the bank, right?
Oh yeah,
Banks,
absolutely.
50 banks, all the way to now, to when you try to position and pitch and, whatever. So yeah, did that for a few years, got on involved in some large, industry projects that allowed me to just have a good retainer and whatever. But I was like, yeah, this is cool, but this is not a business, right? And I could continue doing this, but two things happened. A, it wasn't a business, and B, I could see that when we ran these large industry projects, um, there was so much inefficiency in the way these projects were run in a bank, in a telco, in whatever.
You're talking about
There was
on their end. There
on
was a
their
lot
end,
of
yeah, which I
inefficiency.
was
Yeah.
part of. I
Right.
was
Right.
being coming to run a project. Like, so we'd have hundreds of Microsoft project plan documents that would be created and shared and merged, and Word and Excel spreadsheets for issue tracking, risk registers, change requests, budgets, and then many people would sit in a project office or a program office so that they could merge this data from the different streams of work so that management could have a dashboard of green, amber, or red of what happened 2 weeks ago. And I'm
Yeah,
like,
right.
this is
That's right.
dumb. It's year 2000.
Just the worst lagging indicators there are. Right. You
Yeah.
can't stay on top of anything.
So is there not a central system where everyone just updates their bit as they're going and real time? There's real time visibility. Here's the issue. Here's where people are up to. Now, this is back in year 2000. So no LinkedIn back then, no Facebook,
Right.
no obviously Slack. And I go,
Isn't
there's
that
a
weird to think
product
about? Isn't that weird to think about that stuff didn't exist forever
didn't
and
exist.
always?
And it's important it didn't exist to understand the context of the timing of this, because a lot of the time now when we
That's
look at
right.
product market fit opportunity, you go, is the market ready for this? And so, and sometimes it's not your product that creates the wave of behavioral change, like the consumerized experience of what people now expect in enterprise, right? That's
That's
happened
right.
because of Apple and Android and what they used to on the apps. If that didn't happen, there'd be a different user experience we'd expect from our corporate systems, right? Which is
Correct.
meant Salesforce and Slack and Microsoft and LinkedIn have had to lift their game to come to the party on the enterprise B2B side. Anyway, we'll get to that. But what I saw was a gap of This is dumb. Why isn't there a system? I'm the guy to create it.
Yeah. Why
So
do
of
we
course
need
I
a
give
whole
up
set
this.
of people to aggregate data? Why can't we just put it all where everyone can see it in real
Exactly,
time almost?
exactly. So I give up my lucrative consulting business and go and take a 50% investment in a software development company, and I buy out 50% of it to then change it to become a product business.
Hmm.
So instead of just doing bespoke software development, we're going to take one product, we're building an enterprise project management software, and we're going to bring that to market because I can see there's a gap in the way the market is doing this. And this is back in, client server days, so not web, not cloud. There was no AWS, there was no spinning up anything.
Right.
Literally, to sell into the bank, I had to be walked in with a security person into their data
Yeah.
center where
Yeah. They're
he had to go through
on-prem stuff,
the
right?
eye scanning to get through the thing,
Oh wow.
watching me like a hawk while I inserted the disk to install the server side, and then each desktop side had to have the client. Like, this is painful days, right?
No,
um, anyway, so we brought out a
we didn't know
product.
we didn't know they were painful though. We thought, man, this is so cool.
Yeah, it's cool. It's software, right? It's easy. It's
Yeah, right.
quick.
We didn't know it was painful. Now you look back and you're like, "God, that
Oh my
sucked
god,
so bad."
that's and then of course,
Right.
if you find a bug and you have to change every person's desktop one by one, right? Every
Yes,
upgrade.
that's right. Hey, how about the
So
times when you had to have like the key, like the thing that went in your computer that you had to physically plug that in so that the software worked?
right, right,
Remember
right.
those? Oh,
Security, yeah,
just
yeah, yeah.
brutal.
Good old days.
Mm.
Anyways,
Yeah, the good
so
old days.
brought out that product to market, um, sold it into Commonwealth Bank, Deloitte Consulting, West
Oh wow.
Farmers, which is a large multi-billion-dollar listed company here in Australia, Colliers International, the property players, and I was all excited. I was like, look at all these different industries that I've sold into this project management software, and each one had all these different use cases on how they were using our product, different groups within them, whatever. And I tell the story now, and I was like, but of course we hit a limit, right? We hit a limit because of many reasons, but um, um, at the same time there was this other little Australian company that started pretty much the same time and didn't do what we did, didn't have all the bells and whistles of milestones and issue tracking and risk register and task management and time sheeting and everything that we kept adding to this product because we thought that's what would require to keep selling. There was this one little small Australian company that started a product that was for bug tracking for software developers. I'll give you one guess on who they are.
I'm not gonna guess because I'll get it wrong. But you go ahead.
Atlassian.
Yeah, I've heard of them. Yeah, I've heard of
I'm
them.
sure you have.
Yeah.
and so
So
And so now,
yeah,
when I often tell founders around being a narrow niche ninja and focus really tightly on one narrow niche and do one thing really well, I keep telling them that story. I started my
that
company at the same time in the same space as Atlassian. Look where they are. They're a multi-billion-dollar business. And look at me. I'm stuck here talking to you. So come on.
hey man,
I say
there's
this
no
lovingly to everybody that I saw
yeah.
because it's a reflection on me, not on you.
Yeah, I got you. That's fair. If I
I
were
say
you, I
that as
would.
a bit of a
Yeah,
joke, but it's a reminder. Like this is why it's important to be a narrow niche because they started with a narrow niche. They were only focused on bug tracking for software developers, whereas I
have you?
again got excited about like I'm solving everyone's problem. Look,
Sure.
I'm going to take this everywhere. I'm going to be a bazillionaire by the end of the year, and in fact, the reverse happened. You
Have you
learn.
gone back and looked at maybe Atlassian's model and tried to identify how it was they identified that niche and how they approached, okay, we're going to solve this. Have you gone back and looked at that case study and tried to identify, how did they do that?
I don't know about how they did it. I think the how is for me hasn't been as interesting than
Hmm.
seeing sort of sorry why they did it is not as been interesting, but how the how part was they were very clear on who they were serving. So that And then also their distribution model was very aligned to that. See, when you're saying I'm doing this for software developers, and in the days where there's no internet and no easy user experience the way we've got it
Sure.
today, their distribution model was you pay us up front. We'll give you a link to an FTP download place where you can download our software, install it yourself. You're an IT guy, right? We're selling it to IT people.
Yeah,
You'll
that's
know how
fair.
to do this. Nothing had to be pretty because everyone just wants to see the command line explanation of how to do
Hmm.
this. So
Yeah, IT guys don't really care about pretty that much.
for their target audience, perfect
Right.
distribution model. So they were quoting from day one. They had NASA as a customer from Australia.
Hmm.
NASA was downloading their product and was using it, right? So you look at that, you go, boom, everything perfectly aligned to that persona, that target audience. Whereas with us, I had marketers and product people and engineers and professional services and people in tax. And I was thinking, look at me, I'm good. I've gone and secured all these different customers. And of course, you can't serve all of them. They're all got different technical experience. They sit behind different technology sets, whatever. So their product grew like wildfire because the people that needed to install it on the servers were the domain controllers of their own servers. Whereas with us, we always
Right.
had to sell to one group, convince the IT that we're safe. Then there was a different, there was the user group, there was the buyer group, and there was the approver of the technology. Whereas with theirs, all
Hmm.
in one, right? I have a need to build software. I need to track bugs. I'm running the server myself. I can whack this on a credit card and do it. Boom. Beautiful. And then the
Yeah.
rest is
So
history,
so
obviously.
so what they did was they basically streamlined that process and said, we know exactly what our end user wants, and we're going to provide that to them with the least amount of barrier to entry.
Least friction. Absolutely.
Yep, that's right.
And we're
That's
not
right.
going to also try to, if there's another group that wants to use this product in a differentiated way for a different purpose, not my problem. I'm not going to try to go and add extra functionality, because it's a different user group. Today they serve a bigger audience, but they can, right?
Sure.
But until you get to a critical mass and a revenue and profit momentum, you don't want to do that. And so, um, but anyway, obviously lots of learnings going from selling myself as a consultant to all of a sudden selling enterprise software. So I still look back, I go, how the hell did I get into Commonwealth Bank and to Deloitte? Like
Yeah.
I sold them enterprise grade software. We went and installed on their servers in a bank. Like, how did that happen? Right. So,
Yeah,
um,
I mean,
anyway,
the security profile for that is insane, and
yeah.
so
So I go
for you
back,
to be
I
able to
go,
do that is great.
the back, then that goes back to the hustle and the love for
Right.
doing things that do not exist and brings about change. And that I think is the DNA makeup of Sid when I think about it.
One of my things I always said about doing things that don't exist currently is that you almost can't fail at that, because if it doesn't exist, then pretty much anything you bring into existence is success.
I like that.
And then you can iterate off of that,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So if it doesn't exist and you bring it into existence, you've already won, even if it's clunky and doesn't work exactly like you want it
Yep.
to. Then you take that existence and you figure out, okay, how are we using this? What are we doing with it? And then you iterate off of that. But bringing anything that doesn't exist into existence is, by definition, in my mind, success already.
Very cool. I like that. Yeah.
Okay,
So
so you do that for a while, and then how does that end, and what happens next?
well, we hit a plateau in terms of sales. The idea was we get into all these accounts, we have a beachhead set of users, they use it, they love it, and then they tell other departments and they add users. But that wasn't happening. And in fact, not was it only happening, they weren't actually using the product that we'd sold to them. And I kept
Hmm.
trying to understand why. Your reporting's not good. You don't have a Gantt chart. You're a project management software. How can you do project management without having a Gantt chart? Oh, you've got a Gantt chart? Well, Microsoft Project is the industry standard for Gantt charting. You should have an integration with that. All right, we'll build an. So we kept pouring money into this thing, like more features, more features, more features. And then one day I was in a training session with one of our user groups. I was trying to explain to them, and I kept saying, look, all those things that you've emailed around, all those issues, all those risks, all those status updates that you've discussed, it's not efficient doing it out of email. if you just do it in this one system, everyone gets the update. And then I had that aha moment, right? Which was we were asking users to re-enter information that they'd already communicated at the ease of email later in the week so that management could have their dashboard, but this product was not actually serving them and helping them do their job better. Like it's easy for me to
Mm,
email you and go, hey, Justin, blah, 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 here's a lead, rather than log into Salesforce, create a lead, create the right opportunity, do all the steps that we need to, and then tag you as the person in there. Of course, I'm excited. I
right.
want to tell you about a lead, or I've got a burning issue. There's a problem. I don't want to go find our Zendesk or whatever it is that we're using and log a ticket. I want to call you or email you or text you and go, dude, we have a problem, or the customer has a problem.
Yeah. Sort this out.
Or
Yeah.
the customer's got a problem, and we say to the customer, "Oh, can you please update our issue register?" I'm like, dude, you update your issue register. I'm telling you the issue. It's this, and I went, "Oh,
Right.
we need to be at the point of creation where information is created. If we can't capture it at the point of creation, I'm going to pack up this business and go find something else to do because I've realized
Sure.
we're asking for behavioral change that has no value. There's no benefit for me to go and change that behavior. Like, why would I?
And it's also a sticking point. It's a sticking point that'll end up being a fatal flaw.
Yeah. So we came up with the idea that if we could capture information inside of email and then push it to sources or places of record, then maybe we've got a chance. But by this stage, um, I was married, I'd had a mortgage,
Mm,
and I'd gone from earning my 300K in my personal business to not earning anything because I kept pouring money into this business. I'd bought it,
right.
plus we're not making enough revenue to pay all the developers, and so I'm just getting over my head.
Yeah,
I
you're
was
just
like, I've got
bleeding
yeah,
money at
I've
that
got
point.
I need to do something, but I can't keep building it and hoping they'll come. So this forced a behavior where I um, ended up creating two PowerPoint pages, so not even presentations, pages which I printed out. They were mock-ups, and back then there was no Figma and all this fancy stuff, Canva to do
Sure.
nice mock-ups. So like literally it was, copy pasting, screenshots of ideas of, hey, if we create something that's embedded in Outlook that allows people to just communicate issues and actions to each other via so not leave Outlook, just go new issue, here's the date, here's the priority, here's the
Sure.
description. Is that something that customers would buy? And I took that to Commonwealth Bank and to Deloitte, and I said, you know, here's what we believe is the problem. You've bought the product, you want to see more usage, so do we. We're asking people to change behaviorally. There's no value for them. If we embed this in email, we think they'll use it. Do you agree? They're like, yeah, we think you're onto something, Sid. And I said, okay, so see this mock-up? This is a mock-up of what we're thinking of building. If we build it, will you buy it? And they went, yeah. And I said, no. What I mean is, will you buy it today? And they went, yeah. So there was enough trust there. And we sold $100,000 worth of software licenses on a product that was not built yet, literally after these two PowerPoint slides, right? And that gave the trigger to then go and build an email version of our existing product. And we ended up bringing that out in 6 months, used that as evidence to then go raise an angel round, go, look, we think we've cracked something. If we can capture information at the point of email creation, that there's look, the bank's already put a forward order on this. Yeah.
Sure.
So I raised $500,000 in angel money at the time. And then, but we had a bigger vision. And the bigger vision was, this form filling inside of email or whatever, that's the first step. But the holy grail is if we can use natural language processing where people are just communicating in natural form. And I'll email you, Justin, good to chat, blah, blah, blah. It will ignore all that. But as soon as I
Sure.
say, hey, man, there was a problem with, the Chevron account, it would pick up that, hey, I'm just talking about an
Yeah, it
issue,
picks up on the word problem, and
problem,
then everything
Chevron,
after
due
that
date,
it grabs.
whatever. And within the one email, it could identify multiple actions, issues, owners, dates, whatever. That was the holy grail. So we used that learning to then raise that $500,000 round, and bring the product, and it was successful in terms of what we did. But then we had this bigger vision, which we ended up having another top up to make it $1 million angel round, and then we raised a Series A, and that's when we packed up wife and kids and moved to the Bay Area to launch what was
Right.
Liaise, a AI-powered natural language processing inside of email to automatically detect actions and issues that get discussed in business communication. So
That's impressive. And so what was the name of this company before we continue talking about
yeah,
it?
so it's called Liaise, Liaise. Terrible name
Liaise.
for the
Okay.
US market because you guys, don't know how to spell it or pronounce it. Like everyone says, is it Liaise? Is it Liaise? Is it, it's a word that's used in
Well,
UK and
I do know
Australia.
how to pronounce the word. I can't spell it, and don't pressure me into trying to spell it.
Dude, I'd
But I do
secured all
know
the misspellings. I
liaise,
had Liaze as in case people spelled it Liaise.
and everything pushed to the actual where it should go.
That's
Yeah,
right.
that makes sense.
So that was a learning in international branding and naming. Um, moved to the Bay Area, and we'd secured money, so that was good. And then, but the timing was bad. 2018, sorry, 2008,
Sure.
not 18, 2008,
8. Yeah.
and August 30 we land there, and then September is when GFC formally hit the market and so on, right? And then November Obama got elected and all that good stuff. Um, so we land there. We are building a new code base. So remember, because this is going to be the AI version. So we've left the Australian team
Sure.
here, and I've hired a general manager to run Australia and keep the customers happy. We are over in the US building a new team on the product side, on the development side. I'm building a go-to-market team. Meet some amazing people through my own networking as well as our VCs over there that connected me to people. So um, and we end up, launching. We were in stealth mode, but then we decided that we're going to launch the company. There's two big launch events in the Bay Area: TechCrunch, and the other one is Demo. So Demo is where
Hmm.
where VMware, Salesforce, Citrix, they launch their
Gotcha.
businesses, very B2B type businesses rather than B2C, TechCrunchy type
Hmm.
companies. So we decide to launch it Demo, and in the meantime, I've brought on one guy who was ex VP of worldwide sales of HP, Norrin McAllister, who was an angel investor. And my VCs introduced me to him, going, "This guy, when you have a product ready and are ready for a sales VP, this guy would have connections in the market that would have a good referral for you." So I meet him, and we like each other. And I'm like, why do I want someone that he knows? I want him. Now, this guy's retired. Like, he worked at HP for 20 plus years.
Right.
He's, so anyway, I talk him out of retirement. He comes across and joins as our VP, sales VP. And this guy had all sorts of people on speed dial. Like, he'd call it at the time, BlackBerry, pick up his BlackBerry, he'd call the CIO of Siemens USA and go,
Oh yeah.
"I've
Well, that
joined this
helps.
crazy Sydney from Sydney character. They're doing something really clever in email. You're buying some." That's it. That's the kind of relationship we had with the
Yeah.
CIOs, right? As I was like, amazing. I had the ex head of communications of Apple, Barbara Krause, as my PR lady. She runs a PR agency. She joined as PR lady. I had another really cool guy, Barak Berkowitz, who was our advisor, who'd come on to sort of help with some things. And all three of them are like, um, okay, so we're in stealth mode. No one knows about us. The Aussie company, not proven in the US, all these problems. And here I am saying, for Demo, they said that year they're going to have an overall People's Choice winner and $1 million ad prize that goes for the People's Choice winner. And I'm in our team meetings. I'm going, guys, like, we're going to win this thing. So these three senior, experienced people pull me aside and they go, "Sid, like, look, your enthusiasm is awesome. We love your vision, but you've got to face the
Sure.
reality. Like, you're a nobody. You're not known. You're an outsider. You
Yeah.
don't even have a website."
Let's let's pump our
Yeah,
brakes a
like,
little bit on
and
that.
because you're
Let's
only
be
setting up for
enthusiastic, but
failure, and because
sure.
you're sort of motivating the team, that we're going to win this thing, and it's usually it's the product companies that win, like physical products. This is software, and we're still in beta. Like,
Right.
come on, And I said, "Are you guys finished?" And they go, "Yeah." I go, "We're going to win this thing,"
We're gonna win
and we
it.
won it. So if you
Man,
look
that's
up
awesome.
Liaise, Liaisc, demo, fall of
Thanks for helping me spell it.
2009. People's Choice winner. It was $1 million prize, 500,000 for us, 500,000 for the B2C category winner. And yeah, people love the demo, love the concept of you can type in email and this thing automatically picks up actions and issues, and all of a sudden, we had all the M&A acquirers, start calling us, right? Because they went, you're right. If we can capture corporate information at the point of creation without asking people to make change, you've won. And so Salesforce, Jive Software, Google, all these people started going, this is interesting. Let's talk about it. So they all
Sure.
approached us. In the meantime, we're in beta stage. The product's not fully ready. And we went from that point to the next 12 months, ran out of money. GFC had hit, hard to raise another round. Our product never got to the vision that we wanted it to in terms of the way it would work. And a fallout between me and the co-founder, my other co-founder. And so we were in a really dark place. Like we went from this massive high to this
Sure.
thing. So then we tried all sorts of things. I'll save you. I'll save you today from that, all the details of the back and forth. But we tried all sorts of things, but basically got to a point that we need to shut down the company. We just can't go. So
Mm.
my youngest was 30 days old, Dylan, who was born in the US, and so he was born in October, so it's November now, and we're so a month out from Thanksgiving and Christmas, basically, let's say, and I've had to let 20 people go, and I'm in the US on a visa that's attached to the company, but all of a sudden I don't have a company, I don't have a job, I don't have a business, and I bankrolled this thing. So go back to the story of how I started on the journey. I've even lost our house back in
Right.
Australia, so I'm leveled. So
Oh,
I'm in the US, 3 kids, um, 500,000 in debt, and no job. And I need to leave the country in 10 days because that's the visa situation with having the job.
wow.
So here I am. I'm alive. It's all good.
Right. So all of that is remarkable. And you talk about winning that, the highest of highs and saying, we're going to do this and winning it as a beta product and not even anything that's like a tangible thing. It's just here's some software and it's going to win and it wins. And so the highest of highs down now to what was the time frame between, hey, we won this thing to, oh shit, I got to be out of the country in
About
10
12 months,
days.
roughly 12 months.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
in a year, and a year's fast, especially when
Yeah.
that kind of change is happening. It feels like, good grief, how did this
Mm.
even happen? Looking back on it now, what are some things that you would do differently, potentially to change that outcome, or do you think anything could have changed that outcome?
Hell yeah. So everything that's happened is my responsibility, and I take full ownership of it. Right. So um, I go, yep, I screwed up. I was the CEO, and I could have done more. I could have done better. So first one is around the courage of dealing with issues early. So I now talk about have the fight early, not because you're violent or not because you're problematic, but because having the fight early, you might end up with a bloody nose, but it avoids brain hemorrhage later on. And that will,
So are you familiar with a guy named
of
Jordan
course,
Peterson? So Jordan Peterson has I don't know if it's his quote or he's quoted it, but he basically says that conflict delayed is conflict
absolutely, yeah.
magnified.
He says it
And
much more
so
eloquently.
it's similar to, yeah, well,
Of
of
course, he
course he does
does.
because
He's,
Jordan Peterson, but it's exactly what you're
yeah,
describing, right? So have
yeah.
that fight early, man. Let's get this out of the way. Let's have this discussion, and so
Yeah,
we can move
and
forward.
so that sort of brings back home the importance of values alignment in the leadership team, in the founding team. And when I say values alignment, doesn't mean my values are better than yours or yours are better than mine. It simply means alignment, right? And also understanding what are the
Sure.
negotiables versus non-negotiables, and not most importantly, not kidding yourself, right? Yourselves, right?
Mm,
Because you can
sure.
look at something and you can tell any story that you like about it. So, what story are you telling you about your past? What story are you telling you about your current situation, about your own relationships, romantic relationships, business relationships, sibling relationships, parental relationships, whatever it is? What are the stories you're feeding yourself? And for a long time, there were differences between me and my co-founder. And we kept saying we're the yin and the yang because everyone could see we were different and whatever. And so that's all good. That's all cute. But when it comes to the core, you have to be aligned on the things that drive the business. And it wasn't that he was right or wrong or I was right or wrong. When there was a misalignment, I didn't have the maturity back then to be able to call it out, own it, and do what I would do today, and which I've done since then multiple
Sure.
times, right? And early. So that's one big learning. The other big learning is be careful what you pitch because you can be too smooth in your pitch. Like I shouldn't have raised a Series A when I did. I didn't have a proven product that was deserving of a Series A. I was good at my pitch. I was able to tell the story. I was about to tie things, but then I have to own it now. So be careful of pitching and raising money. That's the start of the journey. It's not the end. And often you go, oh, I raised the money. It's all good. No, it's not all good. Now the responsibility starts. You got to deliver a return on
Right.
that.
Right. Well, now
Now
you
you got
got
to
to
produce.
produce. Yeah, that's the now real pressure
Yeah,
enters the equation, and I've had it's as simple as it's going to sound. I've had people ask me before about this podcast, like, are you going to monetize it? And I said, you know what, I don't know. And I said, if it does, it'll be something that naturally occurs. I said, but monetizing it introduces some things that maybe I don't even want to deal with. All of a sudden, I have to I have to read copy for brand X, and brand X says, you know what, I don't like the fact that you use the
that's
word
right.
shit in your podcast, so
Yeah,
don't say that anymore. And so the similar thing, like you raise that money, and now it's all of a sudden like, great, yeah, I know we believe in your product, go build it, and then you're like,
yeah,
now I got to
that,
build it,
yeah,
like it's
yeah.
got that kind of thing, and you better be able to produce that because that
That's
money
right.
isn't free.
And so, yeah. So could I've when I look back, could I've done things? Hell yes, lots of things. I own it. I ended up having a good conversation with my investors and whatever, and maintain relationship. And many of them, and in fact, some of them reinvested in the Contexti journey. Right, the next venture. That was my comeback story
Sure.
after the wipeout. So for me, the personal relationships matter, and the sort of and you learn from that. You go, yeah, that was a failure of a venture. It's not a failure of me, right? And so, and there's an
Yeah.
important distinction because a lot of people go, how do you get on? How do you move on? How do you? I'm like, well, I did things with good intention. I had a go. I made mistakes, and I'm going to make more mistakes tomorrow, and so that's just part of the deal. And but when I eventually leave Earth, at least I've had a crack at doing things. I've not just sat there
Oh
like
man.
I've attempted things, I've tried things, I've learned, I've grown, and I've been very open about passing on the learnings, the insights, the lessons, the screw ups, whatever. Hopefully, to add value to someone else's life, whether it inspires them to do something or to reflect on their own what they might call failure, to go, yeah, it's just a venture failed or a attempt failed. It's not me as a person. And then anyway, you learn and you grow and you move on.
Sure. So in saying that too, the venture failed. I didn't fail. It's not a failure of me. It's a failure of that venture. Now, obviously, you look at it in retrospect and you realize, hey, there are things that I personally could have done differently, and we've touched on those things. In the moment, though, was it hard to separate that? Was it hard to say, hey, this is not a failure of me in the moment, or in the moment where you're like, I failed, obviously, and this isn't a failure of the venture.
Um, I didn't dwell on it too much. I can't really, like, literally, it was company has to shut down. Next day, I got to figure out how to put food on the table because I was in Palo Alto paying $4,000 a month rent and $2,000 a month health
Wow.
insurance, and now I didn't have a job. So,
Yeah, and you had a brand new kid.
excuse me, yeah, and a new kid, exactly. So I didn't have time to dwell. That survival instinct kicked in, right? Of how am I literally going to put food on the table, and
Yeah.
now
So
what
so now
exactly?
what, right?
So yeah, and then I've done obviously a lot of reflecting on it since then. It's been over 10 years now. and lots of learnings along the way, lots of self-discovery, and new mental models on things, right?
Sure. So you had 10 days to get out of the country. Obviously you did, because now you're not in the US, you're in Sydney, or Sydney back in Sydney. And so you get back to Sydney, and then what?
So
What do you do then?
what I figured was the um, visa was attached to the company. The venture was shut down, but technically the company we didn't shut down. I negotiated with VCs to keep the company alive as a shell.
Mm,
So I maintained my visa status for another year, stayed in the US for a year, and
mm,
launched a back to the consulting gig. Right, I've done everything except coding now by this stage. Raised money, product market fit,
sure,
hiring,
sure.
firing, partnerships, deals, whatever.
So did you go back and you
No,
rekindle
no, no. So
montage, or
I
did
launched
you
a
name
brand
it
called
something
Growth
new?
Q, like the Growth Quotient, which I still use now as my coaching, and
There you
it's
go.
like
There
the
you go.
EQ, IQ.
That is
Yeah,
decidedly a better
hell
name.
yes.
I'm not gonna lie.
Um, and so Growth Q, and yeah, and I figured out that I can help international companies with working products try to enter the US market, because what I'd established was good business development on the ground. I just didn't have a working product. That was part of our problem, right? Why we had to sort of
Yeah.
shut shop.
And so basically your pitch is, if I can sell a non-product into the
I can,
US,
yeah, it is what
surely
exactly,
I can get
exactly,
a working
exactly.
product into the
I
US.
ended up working with
Yeah.
companies out of Norway, Belarus,
Right. Yeah.
Poland, Japan, more Aussie companies trying to enter
Wow.
the market. So I became and then again, I got offered a handful of roles, but my lessons kicked in and I had those fights early with the board, which meant I didn't accept any role because
Mhm.
I felt like there was mismatch between things that was saying versus I could see that was problematic. Anyway, long story short, um, a very close family member was diagnosed with cancer, and I was like, you know what?
Mm.
What am I doing here? I need to be back home to be with them. And my kids are growing up without grandparents, and the grandparents are missing out on their only set of grandkids. And I'm literally starting all over again. How about I restart in Australia? So a year later, moved back,
Sure.
and thought look, I've really screwed up. Like I've lost the family home, this entrepreneurial thing. You know, I I I, I better just put my ego in check and go take a job. So I call around while I'm in the US to my network, and I secure a job over the phone. A couple of calls through the network to become like a business development director of one of the companies here in Australia, who's got large presence and multiple subsidiaries and businesses. And it was one of my ex-investors who went, "What? You know, if you're coming back and whatever, I've got a role for you to run all of New South Wales, Sydney, right?" Um, and moved back, and I landed in the role. Sorry, I landed in the country. I was meant to start the role in a couple of months, but I'd already updated my LinkedIn that says I've got the role, and I said starting in February of 2012, and people started
Sure.
my network started contacting. Oh, you're back in the country. What are you doing? Blah blah blah. And all of a sudden, little did I know that I've already sold some services work for this professional services IT company that I'm still not legally part of yet. And I don't have a team in Sydney because all of the team is based in Melbourne. So I've offshored the work to Ukraine, because while I was in the US, I ended up working with a large offshoring company that was doing a lot of work in the US with a team in Ukraine, Belarus, Poland, and the UK. I was helping them with their US BD. And anyway, so I give it to them. And this company, thinks this is wonderful. Like, you haven't even started the role, you've made a sale. And uh, long story short, when the role formally starts, I figure out that this business has multiple competing business units with my one. Excuse me, one second. Yeah, figured out that they've got multiple competing business units and that and I'm saying, guys, this doesn't make sense. Why are we all competing with one another? And they're like, oh, well, these are acquisitions that we've done over time, and yes, they're absolutely competing with you. And I was like, doesn't make sense. So I try to escalate,
Hmm.
and the message goes up, comes back down. Let me just switch this off quickly. Sorry. Uh, Message goes
Yeah,
up,
no
comes
worries.
back down. Sid, quit complaining and get on with your job, right? And I was like, but are we chopping each other's legs
Right.
here? They're like, yep, we are, whatever.
Yeah, but wait, are we on the same team
Yeah.
here? Like, what's
So
the
I'm like,
deal? You know?
time out. I can't do this. This is not healthy. Like if every step I'm going to take, you guys are someone in my own company, like sister company, is going to try to take a swing at this. It's not going to make sense. And I figured this out in the first like 48, 72 hours, by the way, from the time the role formally started, and I got to sit with the sister company officers and all that. And I said, okay, so you're not going to make changes. You're not going to merge the units, whatever. Okay. Look, I tell you, there's massive opportunities in some growth markets: cloud, mobility, security, or big data analytics. Let me go build a specialty business unit for you guys. And they went, oh, the market analysts will respond badly, our share price, if we create a new blah, blah, blah. The more they carried on, the more I had this feeling in my pit of my gut where I went, man, I really need the money. Because I've royally screwed up. I need cash, so I can't really
Right.
afford to do this.
Right.
But you know what? I can't afford not to do this. And the not to do this was, I can't put up in this cancerous environment. This is not healthy. And so it wasn't necessarily about not to do this as in I need to start another company, but I needed to get out of that. And at that time, with the work that I'd done on the groundwork, I looked and I went, well, cloud, security, mobility, yeah, they're all growth markets, but big data analytics or data and creating value from data was the closest to my journey going all the way back. Like, think about it. Like the work that I did at the bank, the work that I did in the project management software company, then the capturing data out of email.
Hmm.
It's always the same thing. We're trying to capture information, data to create value. And I could see that there was the big whole, Cloudera, Mapper, Hadoop market emerging, and there was no one in Australia that owned that as a niche. Now I was like, right, I'm going to take my lessons. I'm not going to be a general consulting, IT services, anything. I'm going to own a niche. And so that's when you and I met, when I launched Contexti in
Right.
2012 as a specialty big data analytics, which ended up being a managed services play. But we'd had training, we had consulting and managed
Hmm.
services. And that I talk about now as my comeback story. Built that from 2012 to 2019 when we got acquired. Served customers like Seven West Media during the Rio Olympic Games, Caltex, SAI Global, Woolworths,
Hmm.
Quantium, um, and Suncorp. Some really good big brand Australian names. Got it to a multi-million dollar, 80% annuity run rate, and then exited. So yeah, that was the. And this time I took lots of the learnings around culture and go to market and focus and this, that, and the other. So yeah, and that was that.
Yeah, I find it interesting too when you think back, going back to your statement on having the fight early, and that sort of drives you now. In your approach is that we're going to get all of our cards out on the table so that everybody understands exactly where everybody's coming from. Because at the end of the day, if we don't, then at some point in the future, and most likely at a critical point in the future, you're going to see that we're not aligned. And I remember back in my own career, and I think there were times that I shied away from a fight or a disagreement or whatever because I was, fearful, honestly, of costing me future opportunities at that particular place or in business in general. And as I've gotten older, I've gotten more comfortable having that conflict because I realized,
Yes.
oh, this is healthy conflict. It's not conflict like, hey, we're trying to tear each other apart. This is healthy. And I wonder, you know, and I don't know. I kind of think I know what your answer might be based on the fact that you were a 17-year-old writing letters to CEOs of multi billion-dollar corporations at the time, probably. But did you, as you got older, was that something you became more comfortable doing, or was that something you were always comfortable doing, but for some reason you just didn't do with liaise?
So I think I have charisma as one of my arsenals. So I've used charisma as a way to guide people towards where I want them, rather than approach it with conflict as such, or have it out. And over time, I've gotten to learn the value of saying, you know what, I'm not going to be an a hole about it, but at the same time, I'm putting the charisma on hold because I want to have a firm conversation
Mhm.
with you because there's something that's misaligned. And depending on what it is that I'm trying to realign, right? If it's aggressive behavior, then I'm not going to be charming about it. I'm going to go, I don't want to. I don't. I'm.
Sure.
You know. I'm not here for aggressiveness, but your behavior right now does not align. Whereas if it's not aggressive behavior, if it's sort of aloof behavior, you go, okay, I need to bring something to your attention. So a loving conversation can still exist. So always now I always go. It always has to start with love, right? And you know, with my kids even and my team and you know our value at home starts with be loving to yourself, because if you're loving to yourself, you can be loving to others and your family members and so on. And the value at the
Mhm.
companies that I lead, actually at Saasyan, starts with care for yourself and then care for others, right? So it always will be with loving intent, but obviously I've become better at it over time and more intentional about it, rather than
Sure.
you know sort of mentioning it, hoping that you understand, versus going, no, no, no. I really need
Yeah.
to make a point of
Yeah.
making sure
Yeah.
we're
Oh,
aligned here. And if we're not, it's okay, because
sure.
everything's okay, except
Yeah.
for being, yeah,
Yeah. Intentionality is critical too, and it's intentional in not so much as like, oh, crap, I gotta have this conversation. It's like, oh, I welcome that
yep,
conversation. That's going to make both of us grow. And to your point, in earlier years, your charisma would you could use that to sort of manipulate's a terrible word to use, I think, but you could coerce people into kind of going your way because of a natural charisma. But I think being able to put that charisma on hold and have a direct conversation when people are used to the charismatic Sydney, when that direct conversation happens,
yeah.
how much more
So I think that
impactful
that's
is
a
that,
point,
you
but
think?
also a point is you're setting the wrong precedents. So charismatic being one angle, and the other angle is I'm very accommodating. So the more I've accommodated, going, oh, it doesn't matter. That's his or her shortcoming. I'll put up with it, and so that's okay. But what precedents am I setting for when things are critical and I need them to now step up? So it's you're a parent, you know what it's
Right.
like with kids even, and it's that the role that you have as a parent or a coach. Sometimes you have to give critical, firm feedback or force or encourage a behavior that might not be natural to them, but you know it's good for them. Like, hey guys, like we have at home, kitchen duty every day. One of the kids has responsibility for, doing chores to help with dinner and setting the table, cleaning up the table, blah blah blah. And could my wife and I always do it? Yeah. But what are they learning or not learning by that behavior around responsibility and accountability? And if they miss something,
Hmm. Yeah. Also, what's the point in having kids if
exactly,
they can't do
totally.
things for
That's
you?
the first. That's that's
There's no,
exactly the
there's
point.
no point.
Yes,
There's 0 point.
I got. We
Yeah.
stopped at three. We should have. If I had that memo earlier, we could have kept going. No.
Well, I think there's a diminishing
Thanks.
return there at some point, but yeah, I don't know. I
Yeah,
don't know. That's
thanks.
for you to figure out. I stopped
Um,
at 2.
anyways, so back to the being able to give that feedback. It actually helps with setting the precedents for and most people are, and that's the point. Being inauthentic is not good. Everything else is good. We don't have to agree. We don't have to be aligned, but we
Yeah,
have to be authentic. And if we're working together, we have to be aligned. But if we decide that we're not aligned for whatever reason, that's okay. I mean, there are so many options in the universe. We'll go off and do those things, right? So,
sure. Sure. And inauthenticity is
yes,
truth, and people respond to truth. They do. Whether they're dishonest people or not, they'll still respond to truth. And I think it's interesting, when you talk about coaching, there's a quote from Mike Leach, and you probably don't know who he is, but he used to be the head
yep,
coach of Texas Tech football, which is where I went to college for a brief period of time. But he had a saying, and he'd given it to all of his assistant coaches, and they had smaller plaques, and then he had the largest because he was the head coach. But it said, as a coach, you're either coaching that activity or you're allowing it to happen. And there's no in between.
Yep.
And you've described that exactly right. You're either coaching that subliminally or overtly, or you're allowing that to happen because you just don't want to face the fact head on. And I think facing it head on and facing it head on early has got to happen. So I think that's a fantastic a message and a great learning for you to have and for you to then apply later as you moved into Contexti and where you are today
Very
with
cool.
Saasyan. So tell me a little bit about Contexti and
You mean
what you
Saasyan?
guys are doing there. Well,
Okay.
what did you do at Contexti?
So
Because that was the next
Contexti,
thing.
yeah, so it was data analytics services we built. We sort of looked at the market and everyone was chasing the sexy data scientist dream. And we're like, well,
Hmm.
for the data scientists to do their jobs, they need data. And to get the data to them, they need data pipelines and data
Sure.
platforms. So, in fact, let's build an engineering company, not a data science company, because an engineering company, you actually have control about on the outcome. You know, you've either built the data flow or you haven't. Whereas the data science is, did we discover a new insight? I don't know how long we're going to go gold digging until we hit gold, right? So that's a hard value proposition.
Sure.
And so that way we
Yeah. You're pretty
when
sure
or how
gold's
and
there, but you
who's
don't
prepared
know
to
when
pay
you're going to
for it
find it or
and
if you're going
so
to
and
find
so
it.
on.
Yeah.
So yeah, look,
Correct.
good business, great team, lots of learnings along the way, really cool partnerships with, you know, obviously AWS, that's where you and I met, but with also with Cisco and Telstra
Hmm.
um, and some good wins under our belt and good, you know, it was a good story end to end, right? It was a good
And so then it was
2019, yeah.
acquired in
By
2019. Is that what you said? 19. And so then from 2019 you get acquired and you're like, man, I'm set. I don't have to do
well,
anything else. I'm
yeah,
just going
I
to
mean,
coast now, right? Because
no, so
that's your
so
personality.
um, it was a it was a good exit. It wasn't a life changing exit. It was a good exit. At least it almost got me and my mojo back, and you know, a few dollars in the bank. But it wasn't like, you know, we were a services firm, so
Sure.
it wasn't like we had IP or whatever. We had good customers, we had good contracts, and we'd built something quite nice, which, you know, Versant valued and acquired.
Sure.
Um, but yeah, from then on, I've been coaching both around helping CEOs in growing their businesses. And I think we were talking before the recording that there's always two stories that we want to be able to write at the end. You know, how did we grow this business, and who you became on the journey. And so there's always the growth in the CEO around their mindset and personality, and
Sure.
some of the unshackling that we spoke about. And that a lot of it is to do with your old stories or childhood expectations or societal expectations, and
Right.
how you view
Right.
yourself and your concept of how you see yourself as emerging always, like you're never there. Um, and then, as it happens, one of the companies that I was coaching, Saasyan, there was an opportunity for me to do a bit more than that, and I've stepped in as CEO to help scale the business and take it to the next level. And we've got a really cool product using AI to help detect cyberbullying, self harm, suicide, threats of violence, online grooming, and so we target K to 12 schools, and we have over 400,000 students, 660 schools currently that we're serving across Australia and New Zealand, and we're figuring out our approach to the US market. So obviously, you know, we sit on, again, it's an AWS partnership. We sit on AWS. It's all, you know, taking data and it's almost my same playbook, right? Except this time I've got a product, not a services company. We collect the data, we
Right.
apply
Sure.
AI to help alert, you know, life-threatening things like kids literally typing, "How do I kill myself painlessly?" Right, and being able to get a well-being counselor.
I saw that article you shared on LinkedIn just the other day
Yeah.
about that. It was a 14-year-old girl
Yes.
in the UK, right? And she had looked at 20. I think it was like 21,000 or something self harm sites and videos and whatever. And it just when I'm reading that, I say 21,000. Holy shit! Like something should trigger
Yes.
somebody to do something about that. at least reach out to this poor girl, and ultimately she did end her life, and that's terrible. And I think that there's such a watering down of things. I heard someone say the other day that this person lost their fight with mental illness, and I thought, no, that person killed themselves. And if we water down that
Right.
language, I think we're going to lose the impact of some of that. And it's just tragic stories. And I think that you're, what a great use of everything that you've done throughout your career in, data mining and all of the things that you like, that your career has led to use that in a way to protect and do what you can to, man, if you save a person, I mean, I think it'd be amazing. But what a fantastic cause. And I can't I when you and I were
Yeah.
kids, bullying's not a new thing. I was bullied all through high school. I mean, it just happens when you weigh 130 pounds the whole time that you're in high school, and you get bullied all the time. The difference in when I was bullied in school and now is when I went home,
Exactly.
that bullying
Never stop.
stopped. But now it never
And it
stops.
jumps
It's
borders.
online. Even if you move
Exactly.
to
It
another
jumps borders.
place in the world, it never
It's not just
stops.
about the timing of it. It also now is
Right.
fast, spread across everywhere. So yeah, I mean, not every day, but every week we'll, you know, hear a story, multiple stories of people killing themselves or people self harming. And then
Mm.
multiple times we'll hear from the schools that we serve, 660 of them, that they'll say, we can't really, for confidentiality reasons, we can't tell you what or who. We just want to say thank you. Your product again, allowed us to intervene something that could have ended up in real tragedy. And then you saw the post that I did on LinkedIn where and the number of people that commented and have shared that post. I've had not equal, but
Yeah.
a significant number of people also reach out to me privately and say, like one person wrote to me when my daughter had exactly the same experience as this girl. Luckily for her, she has gotten through. But we knew at the time she's on these social media sites that are feeding her, serving her more information to do with suicide. But there was nothing we could
Right.
actually do
Right.
about it. Right. And so this concept of who's responsible and everyone has a role. And so that's why I keep saying, it takes a safe village. So my podcast for the Saasyan business is called Safe Village, where I interview people around, what they're doing to help with this entire space, and it's not, to raise awareness. And also when I say,
Sure.
our mission has just begun, because every other day you'll hear of another situation or an angle where you're like, oh,
Oh.
we're failing still. Like as a society, we're failing, and as a company, we still haven't nailed it because technology alone is not going to solve it. So we know there's government and people and parents and kids and regulators. Everyone has to do their bit. But from our bit, from a tech perspective, every day you go, oh, they're now using, okay, Snapchat, and Snapchat is encrypted, and uh, if they're on the school network, we might get a glimpse of something. But if they decide to hotspot or go on their personal mobile device and use their personal data service, we're missing it. And
Mhm.
our service is limited to their school usage at the moment, right?
Yeah, and so I know my kids specifically when they go to school, they're like, the Wi-Fi and this and that. So they have their own, DVNs, and they go through that when they were at school. And so so is your platform, so Sassian sits at the school, and how does it, tell me how that product
Yeah,
works so that I because I don't really know. And you're saying that, your verticals are, K through 12, and you work through those school
yeah.
systems.
So
Tell me how that
actually,
works
from
and
a
what that
product
does.
design perspective, it's very elegantly architected. It's 100% cloud solution. Sits in the cloud. It's hosted on AWS. And we have a number of integrations via API. So we firstly tap into the firewall of the school, and both have a API connection so that the teacher can do some control functions at a individual student level or a class level. So like Year 8 geography teacher can say, hey, for year 8 geography, I'm allowing or blocking these sites, which at a firewall level, you can't do at that individual level. You can either do, either the site is enabled or disabled. You can't say for these users, it's enabled or disabled. So we integrate with the school's identity system. So whether it's Azure AD or Okta or whatever, and their firewall. And then so we make that middleware technology to create K through 12 use cases available for teachers. And then that's one connection. The other connection is we receive all the logs from the firewall. And that means that, and they're decrypted. So, which means we can
Mm,
see all the search terms, all the websites visited, all the videos watched. So, that's one data feed. Then we've got API integration with Google Workspace and Microsoft 365. So, we're monitoring chat and email and Gmail and their documents and images. And then we've got multiple layers of AI that looks for words and phrases that match the words and phrases that we're concerned about, broken by categories like self-harm, LGBTQ slurs, guns, whatever it is, the threats of violence, whatever, right? That the school cares to track.
sure.
So the school can manage their own words and phrases dictionary, but then we've got a crowdsourced version of that. So you can see what the neighboring district is doing. Oh, they've added a word,
Oh, wow.
Momo challenge. Kids are taking videos of themselves, choking themselves out. Gee, we better jump on that before
Oh, yeah,
something
yeah.
happens at our school. So you get the value of that. Then we've got a fuzzy logic near term analysis that looks for misspelling. So if you're calling me an a hole, but not spelling it out, but using the dollar sign or five. Yeah, it picks that up automatically.
The
You don't
dollar
need to
signs, yeah.
write down every next variation of a spelling. So we would have been safe with liaise and liaise,
Nice.
right? So we would have picked up the spelling. Uh,
Yeah.
would have,
It
yeah,
would have been
this
it would
guy,
have
this
picked it
guy
up
can't
because
spell
it was
liaise.
like,
Yeah.
"Oh, this idiot doesn't know how to
Um,
spell it," but
and then we've
clearly he
got
meant
a
this
full
word.
natural
Yeah.
language
Yeah,
processing that
gotcha.
looks for context. So if we're in a chat group, there's a few of us, and one of us says, "Hey, Justin, you're not funny, man. You should leave the school." None of those words were bad. I didn't threaten you. I didn't swear at you. But the context of that message
Sure.
started a bullying experience, and we pick that up, and we then bring a nice summary to the well-being counselor that goes, "Look,
Interesting.
these participants were in this kind of chat. This kid's getting bullied. They may or may not have the courage to go and seek help. Someone should reach out to them as the priority, let alone the person who's the perpetrator." And then we more recently announced a safe image AI. So we're now monitoring, we're using AI to detect image
Hmm.
based abuse, also known as revenge porn, being held on devices, on online drives, as well as
Yep.
um, online grooming. So we can understand if it's an adult chatting to a kid versus there's
Oh,
two
wow.
17-year-olds that love each other at school and it's, a school interest. Exactly. Well,
It's
what you want to start
17-year-olds
seeing
doing what
picking up on,
17-year-olds
like,
do, right?
don't tell your
Uh,
parents, meet me here, send photo, and so we're starting to understand
right, right.
those kinds of behaviors. So amazing technology, great mission-driven business, good business in
Yeah,
terms
truly
of,
is.
uh, you know, uh, revenue, profitability, all of that good stuff. Like it's just been organically built, and yeah, we have a good reputation in the market and really good partners that we work with. So all the firewall vendors like Palo Alto, Fortinet, Zscaler, Cisco, we partner with, integrate with, and obviously Google and Microsoft. So we've got good coverage. So we say use those best in class technologies for what they're built for, and then use us as the AI layer for alerting, reporting, well being, and safety.
So does Sassian, is it looking at school provided equipment, or does it also look at personal
Yeah,
devices
we only operate at the
while they're
network
attached
level,
to
which
school
means we can
networks?
support both bring your own device, personal device, or school issued device. Yes,
Gotcha. So
pick it
so
up.
if I connect to the school's
So
Wi-Fi, you
even
guys
if you're at
can
home,
see my
even if you're at
information
home
and
and
all
you
that.
logged on to
And
your
then going
Google account, we can pick up. We won't see your web activity if you are not being
oh,
tunneled
okay.
through a cloud service like a Zscaler or a Palo. Prisma Access solution.
Mhm.
But we at least will see your email and chat and online content that you've stored in your Google or Microsoft drives.
Hmm. And then going back to the sort of contextual piece of that, where you said, someone said, yeah, Justin, I don't like you, need to get out of school. Obviously, that's kind of the beginning stages of some bullying. Does it work on the flip side? Like if you and I were going to go hunting this weekend, and I said, hey, Sydney, don't forget to bring your gun this weekend when we go hunting. That's not obviously something that's aggressive in any way. It's just telling you, hey, bring this piece of hardware. Does the software then see that and say, this is just a conversation about something, this
Yeah.
is completely
So
normal for this type
we've
of
got the concept
conversation?
of a whitelisting capability. So you're able to say, look,
Hmm.
there are certain terms or certain phrases or certain names that the AI might think, is concerning, but they're safe. So don't alert us or over alert us on that, or don't make it a high priority alert. Alert us, but don't tell me
Right.
there's a gun threat. Just tell me there was a conversation around guns, for example. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And
Someone brought up the
also,
word gun. Yeah.
you have the opportunity to create um, whitelisting based on user groups. So you might say year 11 is currently studying sex education. They're going to be using a lot of anatomy. They're not swearing at each other. Let that get. Whereas if someone in year 7 or year 8 is doing that, I'm
Sure.
going to be
Sure.
concerned. And then our AI also has the
Right.
before we alert
Right.
anything, we do a cohort analysis. So someone's discussing depression. We go, okay, we better pay attention. Wait a minute. All of year 12 is studying the Great Depression as a economics. Okay, 30 people were searching for the same
Yeah,
thing at the
that makes
same
sense.
time. We're not as worried as little Susie over there who's saying, how do I know if I'm depressed? Yeah.
Right. Right. Makes sense. Well, man, it's like I said, you and I have sat and had long
Yes.
conversations at the Venetian, which was awesome. And our discussions were very, sort of topical in nature, like what was happening at that time. And so it's fantastic to get to sit with you for an extended period and just hear kind of your background, coming from Iran to Australia to America, back to Australia, and your path and all of the things that you've learned along the way. And this venture with Saasyan and leading that company, not only are you getting to use all of the things that you've done in the past, and I find it very interesting that years ago you were trying to develop something that would sort of scour
That's right.
email for
It's funny.
keywords, and that's exactly what Sassian does. And so those things have all led you to this point in time, and the work that you're doing at Sassian, like you said, it's a very mission driven focus. I can't tell you the impact that you're going to have potentially generationally on people be if you're able to sort of get ahead of this, and it's tremendous work. And you're I really appreciate the time with you, and I know that you have a whole afternoon, and when I finish here, yeah, I'm gonna go to bed. So I have that to look forward to. But at the end of the day, where can we find more information about Sassy, and where can we find more information about Sydney? You mentioned you have a podcast as well. Man, spill the beans so that we know exactly where we can follow up and
Thank you.
learn more
So
about such valuable
firstly,
work that you're
to learn
really
more
doing
about
there.
Saasyan, you can simply go to our website. So SAASYAN.com, SAASYAN.com. And you can learn more about it. And we already have distributors signed up in the US, and we are on a number of school panels that we can transact. And being on AWS, we can service that market very easily, and have already started piloting and trialing with a number of districts. So feel free to, if you're interested generally, or if you're actually interested in the product, feel free to check out there. To connect with me or learn more about me, go to my LinkedIn profile and connect there. And often I'll put on content to do with, the coaching of CEOs that I do, and mindset and things like that. Um, but actually, what I wanted to also say, Justin, is I've run a few podcasts myself and been on a few podcasts as a guest. Really you're doing a great job of this. I think you've got a great manner and voice, and a great way of gluing it all together and tying it all back. So I want to see you take this really far. I think you're going to go somewhere with this podcast. So congratulations, and keep going, man. Like this is. I think you've got something special here.
I mean, I, I really, I really appreciate that, and it means a lot to me for you to be a part of this. And like I said, just from the second I met you at reInvent to to where we are today, you've always been somebody that's once, or we'd meet once a year there in Vegas, but even beyond that, always sort of felt connected to you, even though we may not speak very routinely, but been fantastic. And just the things that you put out there, and the energy that you have are amazing, and it means a lot to me for you to say those things. And one thing that I thought of as you were kind of wrapping up there, is there a solution with Saasyan for maybe parents to use at home to be able to scour their
Yeah,
children's
there isn't. I think
social media?
from a back to that narrow niche ninja, we're focused on the B2B market, right? So we're serving, and it's a completely different business
Right,
trying to
sure.
serve the home market. So we don't do that. I think there are products out there. I think more
Mhm.
and more the platform providers are providing solutions. Whether you're an iOS product or whatever, where you can have some level of control around your kids. So doing that's important. I'm sure
Sure.
you need to look around, but I think it's equally as important to really invest the time in lifting the confidence of your kids and their own mindset, because you can block and you can try to hide things from them, but that's a unwinnable fight, right? Whereas if you can invest
It
in
is.
their confidence, and allow them to grow and make mistakes, and hopefully we don't want to see anyone hurt themselves, but um, really, so yeah, technology is one part of it, which obviously
No.
we do for the schools, but the other really important part is the communication around injecting this kind of confidence in, and allowing kids to build their own confidence and owning it, right? So that's really key for me anyway. um, who knows?
Man, I couldn't have said it better, and I agree completely that you have to be able to show your kids, hey man, here's everything in the world that's there. Not all of it's great. You're going to learn along the way that, but at the same time, it's that confidence that's going to pull you through. And man, Sydney, I really appreciate that message, and I know that's going to resonate with a lot of people. So, thank you so much again for being a part of it. And man, I hope the rest of your day uh, only gets better from here, because you're having to sit down with a loser like myself. But
No, dude, it was
thank you for
fantastic.
doing it.
Yep. No,
I
this was
really
a great
appreciate
conversation.
everything, and I can't wait to follow Sassy and see where it goes from here. And I know with you at the helm, it can only go great places. So again, thank you, Sydney, and man, if you ever need anything from me, let me know. And other than that, man, I'll just keep tabs on you.
Awesome. Well, thank you, and continue your great work.
I appreciate it. Have a good one, Sydney.
Cheers.